What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go.
All right. Instant reaction. Favorites, big favorites, generally in these national championship games, roll. And Ohio State, NIL, should stand for not in our league. You can just, listen, the number that matters now is 66,000. That's how many kids go to Ohio State. What does that matter? Because Big Ten graduates don't stay, lots of them don't stay in the Midwest. Not enough jobs. They go to the coast, they go make money, and they pour it back into the school. And so these gigantic Big Ten schools, they're not holding bake sales like Alabama and car washes like Auburn to afford the NIL. I mean, their fan bases, they got a lot of Ohio State grads. I know two of them that are big funders of the NIL collective. And you watch that offense, Sean, that offense is, I mean, and their offensive line's dinged up. They just got pros everywhere. I mean, Notre Dame is well coached, good defensively, cannot compete.
Well, think about this. We got back-to-back years now, Michigan, Ohio State dominate and win the national championship, just full of NFL guys. When you look this year, Penn State is in the Final Four. Texas is now an SEC team, but come on. I mean, they've been there for 10 minutes. Last year, Washington's in the Final Four. We know Oregon's not going away. I think when you look at the SEC, Alabama got there last year, and Saban's like, 2 days later, I'm out. So I think and listen, all these rulings are constantly coming out. It's a fluid situation. But one thing we know not is ever going to go back to the way it was. More money, more funding, more cutting checks for these players. And not just Ohio State, I would say the Big Ten in general, Michigan. When I lived in Philadelphia and worked for the Eagles, usually local radio in a pro city, they talked a lot of Penn State. Why? A lot of graduates live in that area. A lot of people went there and a lot of people watched the game. So I'm with you. I think the Big Ten have a huge advantage moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I have a place in Naples, Florida. It's a beautiful beach community, very, very high end. Sarasota, Naples area. My wife introduced me to it. It's all Big Ten fans. And believe me, it is Badger, Buckeye, Wolverine, Spartan flags all over town. And let me just tell you, there is a lot of money in the Big Ten. Those graduates make a lot of money because I've been in Naples for about a decade now, and I'm always amazed by it. I mean, it looks like Rodeo Drive downtown, and that is absolutely, SEC fans go to I think they call it the Riviera, the Redneck Riviera or something. I've never been there.
Yeah,
but then you go down to Sarasota and Naples, and that's a different level of money, and that is Big Ten money. And I'll say this. A lot of people are pushing back and saying this is a one-off. No, it's not. You and I talked about this. Penn State, look at the size of these schools. Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan, Washington's a huge school. They're not, and those graduates, they leave a lot of times their area, and they're loyal. And the SEC schools, like when Alabama think about this. Nick Saban is one of the smartest coaches ever. Look how great of a coach he was. NFL teams would fly down and look at how Alabama ran their program, including Belichick. Look how good of a broadcaster he is. Saban he's literally made game day feel huge. And everybody on that's talented. Reese, Pat, Herb Street, Howard. I mean, those guys are all talented. Nick makes it feel huge. Car dealerships, the way he has leveraged his career, just how smart this guy is. The first year the NIL opened up, Nick Saban saw it and he got very nervous. I was told about Texas. He told his guys, we can't compete with Texas. That is oil money. It's tech money. Alabama cannot compete with Texas. He knew it. He sounded the alarms the first year. And if Saban, who's the smartest coach arguably in college football, he's certainly on a short list, saw it coming, and he got the hell out. Nick could coach today if he wanted to. God, the guy, come on, look at him on TV. He's just so magnetic and dynamic. Nick's a sharp dude. He knows the truth is that Georgia's got some money. Tennessee's got some money. I think the Tide, remember, Washington's in Seattle. They don't have a huge collective, but Jed Fish can recruit. Last year was a rebuilding year. They're going to be closer to Oregon than Iowa going forward. Listen to this, USC's collective now is over 20 million. They've already spent 30 million for the next 18 months. They have to figure out how to pay all these bills. I think the SEC knows it. I think the smart people in that conference can see it before it's happened. But this year and last year, watch the games. There is a gap. Notre Dame beat Georgia and controlled Georgia. They got
like
run
the
off the field tonight.
Totally. I think, listen, you and I turned into an SEC fan during the Saban era. Why? It was the best players. It was the best games. They still have the best talent. The reality now is when Kirby, back in the day, Bobby Bowden, Dabo Sweeney, all the Southern coaches knocked on your door, you were going to go to one of those schools. Now they just call your agent and say, hey, they're offering you $500,000. We'll offer you $850 and some side cash that you won't have to pay taxes on. It's not a fair fight, and that's what this has turned into. It is strictly pay to play. It's why I laugh. Like, forever a great recruiter. Obviously, to become a great recruiter, you had to have a personality, but you also had to be at a program that offered you a lot, right? That might even could pay you a little under the table. Now we don't even, beat around the bush on that. It's like, no, a great recruiter is someone that can offer me $800,000. I mean, the guy was the quarterback that was going to play for Brian Kelly, Underwood. He was going to LSU. And then he ended up at Michigan, not because he loves Sharon Moore and Tom Brady and Dave Portnoy, because they paid him like $12 to $15 million. Even Brian Kelly's like, yeah, we can't pay him that much. We don't have the money. Look at Nebraska last year. Now,
Kirby, Michigan State's boosters. One of them is the guy that owns the Cavs. The other one's the guy that owns the Suns.
So it's like, it is going to be, they got the talent, but these Big Ten, Urban started it years ago, right? When he went from Florida to Ohio State, said, we got to get in the South and recruit the players. Well, now everyone knows that, but they can just cut the check. So I think Texas, like you mentioned, Saban, I didn't know that he said that, but I mean, he's got ears, eyes, and a brain. I mean, it's not hard to figure out. I think A&M as well. I think the two Texas schools that are in the SEC have a massive advantage financially because that's the world we're in. Can you pay the players or not? The most. That's where they're going to go.
Look at this. I was talking to, during the course of this season, I was talking to a general manager, and he said, let me tell you who's going to be number one next year. Take quarterbacks out. He goes, Caleb Downs is going to be number one next year. He goes, that kid would start for every single NFL team as a sophomore in college. He goes, there's not an NFL team he wouldn't start for. And then I texted him. That was midseason. I texted him before this game, and he said, because it's a very weak draft, he said, if Jeremiah Smith, the receiver for Ohio State, and Caleb Downs were available, he's like, these quarterbacks are not good enough. He goes, Cam would probably go over those players because Tennessee needs a quarterback. He said, would they go 2 and 3? He's like, these kids are, I mean, when you watch Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, they don't even look like college players. It reminds me when Jamar Chase was at LSU. Like his sophomore year, you're like, okay, this is a pro receiver who would start. He would start for every team in the NFL the year before he went and left LSU.
NFL playoffs. We're talking about the NFL playoffs. You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is a key to winning in the NFL playoffs. And the key to you scoring big is betting on them at DraftKings, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something as simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it in the playoffs. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big during the NFL playoffs with the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. You could argue, I mean, what's really going to separate are the top 5 or 6 programs because of the money. And obviously, Ohio State and Oregon are in clearly the top tier. Texas, and I would throw Texas A&M in there. I mean, they got a little taste of being back this year, of being good and being right there. They have unlimited money. That's the sport now. What happened to Michigan this year? They finally won a national championship. Then they started getting embarrassed, and they said, "What do you need? What do we need? We don't want to do this ever again." So that's what. And listen, I started at Fresno State. That program wouldn't have existed. I don't know how they maintain it. The Logan Mankins, the Ryan Matthews, all Washington State. How are they going to function moving forward? The moment you get a guy, yeah, that guy might be a third rounder. Oh, he's a sophomore. Every school worth their salt in is DM saying, "Hey, how much you want?" And they leave. They just automatically leave. What we saw last year with Austin Genty, I don't think we'll ever see again. Even the head coach this year said it. He's like, he turned down seven figures to stay here, and all we could offer him was $300,000. I mean, that's the world. One day I was at the gym, probably a couple months ago, and I look up, and his first take is just on one of the big TVs, and it's a kid, and I'm like, "What's going on?" I think Shannon and Stephen A were talking to him, and it's the number one basketball recruit. When I got home, I Googled him. He's going to BYU next year. It's like, it's not hard to figure out. The Mormons cut that kid a massive check. And that, listen, I have no problem with that. I mean, that's in a weird way, that's what I would say the sport has always been, basketball and football, financing these. I got no problem with it, but that is 100% the world we're living in now. And it's
Yeah.
really separating at the top. I mean, think about your guy Lane, Ole Miss this year. They break the bank and then they don't even make the playoffs. Are they less likely to keep
Yeah.
breaking the bank when you don't have results?
Yeah, and I also think this is um, coaches will get poached. A prime example is John. It's harder to fire a college basketball coach because he can go to his boosters, his donors, and his AD and go, "I've made the tournament 12 straight years." Okay, you can't get rid of Sark. If Sark makes the playoff, and he will, 10 of the next 11 years, you're not going to get rid of him if he can win a game or two here and there. And my point being is, so these coaches now are going to make enormous money, like better than NFL money for a lot of these guys. Can the SEC schools pay for that? I mean, let's just say tomorrow, let's say one of the coaches in the Big Ten doesn't work. Ryan Day's fine. Ryan Franklin's gone. I mean, most of the guys are fine. But let's say, for instance, a school goes and offers Lane Kiffin a job. And in the Big Ten, they say, "Here's $12 million." Can an SEC school fund their collective and pay the football head coach, not the staff, $20 million? This is going to funnel down to the coaches.
Yeah.
Is now a lot of these guys are Southern
They've been
guys,
giving
but
up their money, Colin. Brian Kelly gave $1 million to help fund the collective. Did you see that story a month
no.
ago? He gave $1 million of his own salary to the collective. Why? Because LSU. Do you think you have to do that at Ohio State?
No.
But no, it's hard for him to say I'm making $9.5 million in the collective. We're a little short, and then you start getting heat when Underwood goes to Michigan. It's like, well, I got to give in a little bit. That to me was a pretty big red flag for LSU. He had to give $1 million of his
Well,
salary.
if you telling me that, I didn't hear that story. So Saban saying, "Get me out of here." Brian Kelly giving up $1 million. Listen, for years and years, the SEC, and it was just on. Everybody knew it. They were paying kids through the churches, but I'm talking paying a kid 100,000, $150. That is doesn't even. I mean, it just doesn't even compete. And I think I'll just say it now: the SEC may never get worse than the second best conference. But if the Big Ten truly cares going forward, they will control college football going forward. And for the record, Michigan won last year. Ohio State won this year. You see, Penn State, outside of Carter and that tight end, returns everybody.
Yeah.
Penn State, and they're going to bring back Drew Aller. Penn State next year loses a great tight end and then these are first round players, but Michigan next year, Washington, Ohio State,
Oregon.
Oregon's still really good. Like the Big Ten, this was a little bit of a down year. Let's be honest. Michigan in a rebuild, Washington in a rebuild, Caleb Williams leaves, USC in a rebuild. All those teams should be better next year.
Well, the other thing is, and you mentioned Michigan State with their big boosters. I mean, I'm sure you agree. I think Jonathan Smith's a stud, and this is the worst team he's going to have coaching there. So they will be better. I mean, he's a high-level coach. Nebraska funneling in a bunch of money. I think the problem for the SEC is for about 15 years in the Saban era, and when other teams would kind of match them, like LSU on a given year, obviously Georgia at the end. Clemson was basically, as my buddy Phil Savage used to tell me, they were an SEC in their heyday, an SEC school playing an ACC schedule, but they had SEC players. Well, their backups, right? When you start training camp, and you don't know who, like at the time, a freshman or sophomore, who's gonna kind of separate. You just let them battle it out, and then the one guy that wins the job ends up being the first round pick. Well, his backup is still a fourth rounder. And if that guy gets injured, in the seventh game of the season, your backup's still a fourth rounder. Well, now that guy goes, I'm out. And all these other programs are lined up to take him. And he's like, well, I might as well make the same amount of money and go start than be a backup. That was their biggest advantage, I always thought, is they're too deep. Was the last, like right at the beginning of the NIL, right before the NIL, when Kirby was basically turned Georgia into Alabama, he went too deep with like my first rounder is my starter and my backup is a second rounder. Good luck touching me. And you didn't. Well, we saw this year they were a shell of themselves. And it's going to be difficult to just maintain that dominance because they do have the talent in the region, but these other schools just, we got technology now, can just send you the offer contract on DocuSign. So it's like, here's the money, buddy. You want to come? And what do you think
Yeah.
their parents and agents are clearly saying? Ohio State's been doing it since Urban got there, but then Harbaugh started getting involved. We know Oregon's going to keep funneling out of the SEC in the South. Really, Mario started that. Penn State, like the one thing you say, all those guys going back to Penn State, one thing James Franklin is a great recruiter. So
Yep.
if you give him money, his energy and his effort, I do think Texas is going to run the SEC moving forward.
So do I. I
Their
mean, listen,
budget, it's not
SEC,
even a fair fight.
yeah, SEC fans can say what they want. They kept
Bama's in
saying
trouble.
Bama is in big trouble. LSU is in big trouble. Big trouble. Georgia, because they're close to Atlanta, there's some big boosters there. But remember, Atlanta's got the Braves, the Falcons. I mean, they've got a lot of things happening in Atlanta. It's a very splintered market. Yeah, I
And I
don't
think
think.
we were talking when we say trouble, right? The day of going 12-0 and winning Natties, you still might win 8, 9 games, but you're never going to be what probably we've seen in the past.
Oh yeah, I don't even think. I mean, that's not even a take. That's not a hot take. I mean, the SEC, the days of running it are over. Back-to-back years. And again, I'll say it again. Ohio State next year, Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, the two best players in the college football next year, are both back. And I mean, and now you're gonna, how you think the recruiting's gonna go, transfer portal's gonna go off this win. I mean, the players. Listen, man, those star players, they watch what Ohio State is tonight. It's a factory up there. They're rolling. It looks like Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. I mean, I thought the game plan tonight for Ohio State looked like a pro game plan.
Yeah.
I mean, the way, if you watch the game plan tonight for Ohio State, those first two drives, it was so Chip Kelly. Let's build up Will Howard's confidence, easy completions, get the ball to the playmaker. It was just, I mean, I watched enough Chip Kelly games, and I'm like, oh, this is a clinic. This is Chip Kelly, who probably doesn't think Will Howard's an elite player, but within the system, he can get those 12-yard and in completions. He's accurate.
I would say this, if you've watched Chip Kelly since Oregon, if he's busting explosive runs, you got no shot. And the moment they start hitting big runs, you're in trouble, especially with the firepower they have to throw the ball, because then what are you going to do? Stack the box and let them exploit you? And say what you want about Will Howard. I questioned it coming into this playoff run. Colin, in the first half, he was 14 of 15 for 2 touchdowns. And you remove the Texas game, which was a difficult just endeavor for him, given how good Texas is on defense. He was dominant in the 3 matches against Tennessee, which has NFL personnel on defense. Obviously, Oregon is loaded with NFL players. And tonight, just national championship Notre Dame to come out. He's played he's made himself some money. I'm not saying he's going to get drafted in the second day, but I think he's getting drafted in somewhere between the 4th to the 6th round. Versatile
No,
player, throws a good ball.
I think the kid at Syracuse, Kyle McCord and Will Howard, are going to get drafted late 3rd, 4th, early 5th round. But both big, strong, sturdy kids who throw a nice ball with velocity. They'll be fine.
I think McCord, if he has a good, this post season before the draft process, could go on the second day of the draft. Where I think Will Howard, just because he throws more of a pure ball, just
He
from
does.
the
I
pocket,
looked at
lets
him
it
on
rip.
YouTube today. He
He can
throws a
spin it.
really nice, yeah.
And you know how these quarterback coaches are, these offensive coordinators are. They when you're just sitting out there, I think there's just an element to Will Howard, and I would say the same about Riley Leonard. They're just kind of good football players. I don't know how good they would look just in a just shorts, t-shirts, throwing routes on air in front of the head coach. I mean, they're not exactly throwing it like Josh Allen out there, and they're good runners, but they're not running. You know what Riley Leonard does, and it's fun to watch. Is that does that translate to the NFL? Just running over guys? That's hard, and
Yeah.
that's his. But he grew on me over this run. He's clearly a high level guy, and I think both of them um, are going to be loved by once the coaches get into the draft process because they're clearly like just high level kids.